Well, good afternoon. At least it's afternoon my time. I don't know what time it is your time. We're going to chapter 3 now of the Converging Media book. And this is about print media, books, newspapers, and magazines. Now, I'm not going to get into some details on the dates and things like that. I said this in an earlier chapter. Things that you can look up on your cell phone, on your smartphone. I'm not going to make you memorize and go through in some detail. So the other thing is it talks about the functions of print media, the functions of print media, the functions of all the different media we've talked about so far are essentially the same. The transmission of culture, diffusion of ideas and knowledge, entertainment, and of course, they leave it out. But let's be realistic and always include profit to make money. That's one of the functions of it. That's what it serves somebody. Okay. Some distinctive functions of books, and this is an interesting point that the book makes. Religious texts have shaped views and worldviews so profoundly that wars still erupt over conflicting doctrines. The initial books that were written and created into religious texts. There's the Bible, of course, the Quran. I don't know some of the others that might be out there. Another thing that has been used a lot and has affected a lot of people is the use of textbooks in school. Uh, the history of books to today, of course, it started off with scribes copying things by hand to create a book. Then, of course, there was the Gutenberg press came along, the automated press. You could actually create a book by having it printed. But of course, that was so expensive. Only rich people owned it. Only rich people owned it. Let's be realistic. For a long time. Finally, as the way that presses were done became such that books could be made in a much cheaper way, came along the advent of cheaper and smaller books such as dime novels, mass market paperbacks. Of course, now there's print on demand. A lot of people self-publish. You can actually get books printed for a fairly nominal amount, and let alone ebooks, which is almost no charge at all. You just have to get someone to then market it or market yourself. Ebooks, of course, came along, but before that, people were publishing their own books just because the price fell so much. Of course, it talks about book industry issues. There's been a lot of mergers. There's been a lot of reducing of operation costs associated with warehousing and marketing and sales because 2 or 3 companies, when they've merged, then they do the same marketing, but they don't have as many people that they need to have do that, so they get rid of people and lay people off. Of course, the book publishing industry is now very intertwined with the other mass media, such as the entertainment industry, movies, TV shows, things like that. There's a TV show called Justified, and the TV show Justified, it actually says it's from a short story written by Elmore Leonard. The whole idea for this series, I think 6 seasons, something to that effect, was from one short story that was really well written and had these memorable characters in it that someone then bought from Elmore Leonard and made into a TV show. The emergence of online booksellers, ebooks, and on-demand printing is still in the process of transforming both sales and distribution. The actual readership of books, there's been a downward trend, and in spite of the increase in self-publishing. There's tremendous growth in audiobooks, and there's even ebook sales increase has gone along. So that's really probably the future for books is going to be ebooks and possibly audio sales. And distinctive functions of newspapers. It informs the public of important events that have happened typically recently, the previous day, something along that line. Of course, there's local newspapers, national newspapers, very, very few, almost zero local newspapers are now independently owned by someone local in that area. They've all been bought up into mass groups. We get the Tuscaloosa News delivered every morning. I like it. I think it's owned by whoever owns the New York Times. It talks about the history of newspapers to today. Commercial press, U.S. newspapers were initially affiliated with a political party or platform, and that's really the early newspapers in America. That's what they were about. And then the golden age of newspapers in the 1830s, steam-powered presses made mass-scale printing possible. Kind of called the penny press because buying a newspaper at one point in time cost so little that the average person could now afford it. Some current newspaper issues. The newspapers are more likely to pander to popular taste to maintain circulation numbers than they are to necessarily adhere to whether to do strictly news. Newspapers have been experimenting with electronic delivery of the news, trying to get people to subscribe. I go to a place to look up stuff about the Packers, my team. But this one place that I go to, I don't know the exact website, but every time I try to go there, they want me to subscribe and pay them so much money a month, which I'm not going to do. So if I accidentally click on one of theirs, which I'm doing less and less, then I just put it away. I don't know if I would ever subscribe to a newspaper online. I would rather have it in my hand like I do in the morning with the Tuscaloosa News. It talks about newspaper chains. It's all concentrated. I already talked about that a little bit. There's a declining number of daily newspapers. The Birmingham News, I believe, delivers 3 papers a week now. The Tuscaloosa News does 7 still. Many, though, don't do daily anymore. Talks about the sales. There's been a shrinking circulation with newspapers. There's been, of course, an increase in citizen journalism. The diminished readership and time spent reading are very evident in our population. I believe that sometimes we almost, not purposely, we accidentally lead ourselves down a path of being misinformed, which is unfortunate. It talks about advertising. Ad revenues are a large part of what keeps newspapers afloat right now. The circulation, there's only so much people are going to pay for a newspaper. It talks about the outlook. There's going to be more digital subscription. They're going to try to go more and more toward digital and online. Magazines, of course, a longer treatment of topics, different specific functions. Magazines, there used to be a lot of sort of general news magazines, and there are still, a few, but there were a lot more. And now it's much more about individual things, cycling. There's a cycling magazine. It could be cars, things like that. A lot of different things that people would be willing to buy a magazine of. Go forward now, it talks about some current magazine industries. Now, some, as I just mentioned, the general interest magazines have dropped. Much more specialized magazines are there now. The sales of magazines has been declining. Digital has seen some growth in digital magazines. The outlook, the public seems willing to pay for it. If it seems the public some are willing to pay for an online subscription, and especially in specialized areas such as Consumer Reports. That is chapter 3. And I will cut this off and get it online.